Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor. And it's Wednesday. That means it's Comic Book Wednesday, which means it's the world's finest team up between my channel and Steve Donoghue's channel. Every week, we will talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. I will give my take on it. Steve Donoghue on his channel will give his take on it. It'll be exciting. It'll be fun for the 20 of you who are watching. I appreciate it, you guys. So this week, what are we talking about? It's another epic collection this week. Going to do something different next week. But this week, it's an epic collection, and we're talking about Captain America, Man Without a Country. This is the 22nd volume of the Captain America epic collections. Now, not all 22 have been published, but chronologically, this is number 22, which is stories from 1995 to 1996. This is the very popular run by Mark Waid, and I'm forgetting this guy's Ron Garney. I was going to call him Steve Garney, but it's not. It's Ron Garney. So Waid and Garney did this run on Captain America. It was very popular for a few different reasons, which I'll go into. And this is the run which got me back into Captain America. At the time, I had stopped reading Captain America. Captain America had, I felt, been a little stale for a long, long time. And Waid and Garney just injected a whole new energy into the comic book. Unfortunately, this was in the 90s, right before Marvel, who didn't know what the hell they were doing with these characters, decided to outsource all their Avengers characters to outside creators. And they created this thing called Heroes Reborn, I think it was called, where they basically just took all the Avengers characters out of the Marvel Universe and outsourced them to this other company where they started over with these characters with new number ones, and they just got rid of all the creators of the comic books, just dumped them, even though on this particular comic book, it was doing great. It was so stupid. It was a stupid thing, and we had to suffer through it. But the 90s, man, the 90s. Let's talk about the 90s, okay, in comic books. First thing we have to know going into this comic book is just the state of affairs at Marvel Comics during the 90s. It was not good for the Avengers and Avengers characters, which is funny now when you think about it nowadays from our perspective at this time. At the time, in Marvel Comics, the big comic books were Spider-Man and the X-Men books and the X-Men related books. Those were on top. Those were what was selling. The Avengers, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, at this point they were all third string heroes. Iron Man in particularly. Iron Man and Thor, nobody cared about those characters at this time. They just were not popular. Literally third string characters. Nobody cared about them. One of the reasons nobody cared is because Marvel had forgotten what to do with these characters. They had no idea. The 90s were a strange time for comic books. And Marvel found itself behind the curve on comic books. And a lot of their traditional titles just were not selling. And they didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know how to revitalize them. They just didn't know. Which is unfortunate. And the 90s are strange because it was so extreme, the way the characters were designed and what we got used to as far as how characters looked and how stories were told in comic books. It was just weird, man. You'll see some of that in the middle of this because smack dab in the middle of this epic collection is a big pile of crap. Right in the middle of two solid stories is just a big steaming pile of garbage, which was a team up or a crossover between Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, and the Avengers. So it was like this little crossover that's right in the middle of this, and it's awful. It's just the worst piece of crap ever. It's just so bad. Right in the middle of this otherwise decent epic collection. And Captain America, what this book is about is Captain America, and it had gotten stale, frankly. It wasn't awful. You see how I say that with hesitation. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. You know, it was just kind of like, You know, I don't know what Steve Donoghue thought of Captain America at that time, immediately before this run. But to me, it was just, you know, it was just not that great, man. And in the stories, at the end of the previous writer's run, Captain America had become ill from the original super soldier serum that was coursing through his veins and made him super. It was poisoning him after all of this time. And eventually, he died. Or did he? Of course he didn't, but it seemed like he did. And so we have this epic collection, which starts off with Operation Rebirth. They got Mark Waid to write this comic book, which was a great decision. Mark Waid is a really good comic book writer, and the real reason he's really good is because he understands the characters that he's writing about. He understands what makes a good comic book. He understands what makes, you know, these characters great and how to make a good comic book about these characters. And you can kind of see a hint of it a little bit in this cover where we have a very Superman-like cover. And he's kind of saying this is Marvel's Superman, basically, as far as what he stands for, the type of character he is. Captain America is basically, he has the values of a Superman, only for Marvel. Very different character, he doesn't have superpowers. But as far as the type of guy he is, yeah, that's him. And Mark Waid understood this character. And so he was the perfect guy to get to write it. Reading it, I found that it wasn't as good as I remember it being. I remember this being just great. I just thought it was the best thing ever. Probably because Captain America had just been not great for so long. This was just a breath of fresh air, not just for Captain America, but for Marvel Comics. Just to see an Avengers character being done so well was just, it was great. Reading it now, it's good. It's a good story. Both the major stories in this, there are two major stories in this, and they're both good stories. They're entertaining, really well done. They're not the best Captain America stories ever. And like I said, they're not as good as I remember them being, which is interesting, coming at it from my perspective now. But they were good stories. And the artwork was good, which was, you know, not always a sure thing back in the 90s. So to start off with, we get the very 90s Avengers here. There's Hercules looking like a very 90s Hercules. I did not like that whole look where Hercules, you know, just shaved his beard and had a little stubble and just wore a tank top and had the little sweatband. It was so dumb. So dumb. But, you know, there's Hercules. And we have the initial story where Captain America has died, and there's there's Clinton and the Fantastic Four and everybody. They're carrying the coffin there. But, of course, Captain America is not, you know, actually in the coffin. Captain America is actually somewhere else. And he's in a big tank, and he breaks out of the tank. Rah! Look at him. Look how awesome that is. The artwork in this is really good. It has a lot of energy. It has a lot of drive. It's good work. And this was great. We get the real Captain America coming back. Oh, look, it's the phone. Hold on. Sorry about that terrible interruption. Don't people know that they're not supposed to call me during Comic Book Wednesday? This is serious business here. It's Captain America in the 90s. So anyway, Captain America is back. Now, he's been pulled out from the brink of death because he's needed on a mission. All has to do with the Cosmic Cube, which could change reality and warp reality to another's will, causing troubles again. And he's pulled out. And who does he find when he wakes up from his sleep? It's Sharon Carter. Hey, what's she doing here? And why is she so pissed off? And she's looking very 90s. Look at all that hair on her head. And so Sharon Carter, everybody thought she was dead at this point. And she comes back and she's all pissed off and mean and angry and bitter. But she's called Captain America to come in, and Captain America immediately has to fight a bunch of guys because, that's what Captain America does right away, always. But don't worry, it's only a test kind of thing. And it's interesting. So Captain America is pulled out by Sharon Carter, who he thought was dead. And she's pulled him out because he has to, fight off whoever has the cosmic cube and save reality and all that stuff. It's a pretty good thing. It's a pretty good mission for Captain America because reality is already, starting to get warped. Again, the artwork is pretty cool, lots of energy. And of course, the gimmick in this story is that Captain America has been saved and has to work with his worst enemy, the Red Skull. So they all have to work together. Now, this whole part is really contrived. And I don't know how you would feel about it reading it. I wasn't convinced for a minute. I mean, this is just what? And so immediately he tries to clock the Red Skull, but he's still kind of sleepy from his sleep chamber experience, and the Red Skull is just a clone of him anyway, which he might have forgotten. But, yeah, so he's like, screw you, Captain America. So we get this, what ends up being a really action-packed story. It's just all action, which I liked because it harkens back to the original Captain America stories. Captain America has always been an action book. It's just action, action, action. That's what Captain America kind of should be. He's an action hero, basically. And this book gets that right. This comic series gets that right. Even though the whole team-up thing felt contrived. Also, Sharon being all pissy and angry and bitter, that felt a little contrived also. Like, that wasn't very convincing. It didn't seem like... It didn't feel real to the character. Like, it was just, this is just how we want her to be now, So not everything for me worked. The artwork was consistently really, really good. And I mostly liked how things worked out. Like I said, look at that great double page spread. Again, you've got the gutter loss because it's an thick paperback epic collection, but still, I think that comes off pretty well. It's an excellent scene. Of course, the Red Skull tries to take control, because that's not even a spoiler, because you knew that was going to happen. He flashes back to his creation scene. He's a very 90s character looking there, just a little over the top. Cool. Red Skull is back where he wants to be with his cosmic cube. Now he's going to cause a lot of trouble and warp reality. And we got Bucky there showing up in this warped reality. It's really cool. We get a scene from the Invaders, the World War II heroes Captain America used to work with. We get this great scene where the Red Skull's arm gets cut off. Captain America just like, screw you, Skull. Cuts off his arm. It was awesome. It was probably the high point. I'm spoiling it. I'm spoiling the high point of this comic. But it was a high point. And after that, we have the terrible, terrible team up with the Avengers and crossover with the other Avengers characters. And it's interesting if you didn't know the state of things with the Avengers at this time. It was a bad time. One of the reasons I was so happy to see Captain America being Captain America was at this time, Thor was not Thor. They forgot how to write Thor stories. Now, here's the thing that Waid understood. He understood that to sell a comic book about a superhero, that gimmicks only last so long as far as sales go. Hey, let's take away Thor's magic powers. Hey, let's make Thor not a god anymore. Hey, let's make his hammer just a big hunk of metal. And, you know, you might get some interest and sell like 1 or 2 issues, but that's it. Waid understood that you wanted to be true to these characters and just write good stories about them. You can do it. If you write good stories about the characters the way the characters are supposed to be, that's true to the characters, you will sell your book. If you just make good stories, it's not rocket science. You know, you don't have to do gimmicks all the time. Just be consistent and write good stories that people want to read about these characters while being true to them and not screwing them up and making Thor not a god anymore. And that's really lame. So Thor basically at this point is just this bare-chested guy in spandex pants with a big dumb hammer that, you know, if he throws it doesn't come back. It was a wretched time for Thor. Which, if you were reading Thor at the time, and why would you really? But if you were reading it, yeah, I could see there were some things about Thor that were not bad. This is the Thor issue. I actually liked sort of the extreme 90s-ness of it. It's kind of amusing, and it kind of works in its own 90s way. Look at Captain America. He looks like he's taken every steroid that ever existed. But you've got Thor who's not Thor. Look at all that hair. Man, that's a lot of hair going on in this issue. This story is just dumb. So this is not the worst of it. But Captain America and Thor team up for this adventure, which I won't really go into in any detail because why it sucked. But it does get worse from here. I mean, it starts off not great, and it just gets bad. It gets really bad in the Iron Man issue. Iron Man at this time was terrible. Iron Man had lost its way. Iron Man, the third string hero Iron Man, he was pretty much fourth string at this point. Nobody read Iron Man. Nobody cared about Iron Man. It's hard to believe now. But at the time, this is pre-movie Iron Man. This is 90s Iron Man. And nobody cared. And it turns out in the story that Marvel decided to completely betray the whole idea of Iron Man. And it turns out Tony Stark was just like some stooge for Kang. And he was like mind controlled since issue 9 or something and didn't remember it. And eventually died or something. I don't even remember. But he was replaced by a teenage version of himself. Look, I'm teenage Tony Stark, who was plucked from the past and put in this reality or something. I don't remember. I just remember that they made Tony Stark inexplicably a teenager and it sucked. This was the worst period of Iron Man ever. The artwork was crap. The story was crap. The book was crap. They crapped all over Iron Man. And it was terrible. And it just gets worse. So Thor has put on a costume at this point. But look at Thor's costume. That's Thor. Look at him. It's Fredericks of Hollywood Thor. It's just terrible. You thought it couldn't get any worse, but it does. Look at this artwork. It's just the worst. It's just like this steaming pile of awfulness right in the middle. Look, I'm Thor. That's not Thor. I don't know who these characters are. So you get this ridiculous Thor. You got a terrible Tony Stark who doesn't even have a full Iron Man outfit. He's just wearing Iron Man gloves. And then we get to the Avengers issue, which is probably the worst because the artwork is god-awful. John Statima did the breakdowns. Tom Palmer did the finishes. I don't think Tom Palmer remembered to finish it, but it was just terrible. That's, I think, the Wasp. And it's just garbage. Look at Thor. Look at straining Thor there. He's having a hard time. It's hard not being a magical Thor and just throwing a big hunk of metal with... Look at all that hair. It's just terrible. It's the worst. So we have a terrible, terrible issue of of the Avengers. And this was not a great time for the Avengers. This was just so bad. Fortunately, this story doesn't last forever. And we get back to just Captain America's adventures in his own book by Waid and Garney. And we get a story called Man Without a Country, which was not as good as the initial story, but it's still really good, where Captain America is framed and has to stop being Captain America, and they take his shield away. But of course, he does have to save the day, and so he has to take on a non-Captain American identity, which he's done in the past, and it's not the best costume in the world, and he has some sort of electric shield. It's interesting, but the adventure is good, and it does kind of examine his role and what he thinks it means to be an American. It has some great action set pieces, which are done really well. Again, the artwork is excellent. A lot of energy. We've got this mid-air rescue here. It's good. It's a good story. There are some just dynamite scenes and excellent action moments in this story. Unfortunately, it was kind of the last hurrah for Captain America for a while, because immediately after that story, there was like one more issue, which was kind of a farewell issue at the time, and then all of the characters were shipped off, outsourced from Marvel to other creators, and Captain America in Heroes Reborn, I won't go into it, but it was a nightmare of awfulness. It was the worst version of Captain America that has ever happened. And that's including the first Captain America movie that came out in theaters, if you've ever seen that. It was the early 90s film version of Captain America. Was that late 80s, early 90s? I don't know. But it was worse than that. It was terrible, Heroes Reborn, Captain America. It just makes me want to throw up just to think about it. So that was a dark time. And this was like the last bit of goodness we got before that. Waid, I returned to the book after that whole fiasco was over, and did some more good stuff with Captain America, I believe, if I'm remembering right. It's been a while. But this was fun. These stories by Waid and Garney were fun. In the midst of awfulness, surrounded by terrible, terrible Avengers stories and Thor stories and just the worst version of Iron Man ever, we had a decent Captain America for a short time before he was shipped out of the company. But and it makes an interesting epic collection because it does kind of spotlight these stories, and just in the middle you get that just terrible, terrible chunk of wretched awfulness, where you can see just where the other books were at this time. So it's interesting. The two main stories, Man Without a Country and Operation Rebirth, have been printed in other trade paperbacks, so you don't have to hunt this thing down. I think this might be out of print or close to being out of print. It was published a while ago, but I believe you can still get Man Without a Country and Operation Rebirth on their own, or you can get this stuff on digital if you want to. And that way, if you just get those individuals, you don't have to worry about the stupid Avengers crossover nonsense in the middle of this. You can just skip over that whole thing blissfully. But yeah, 90s Captain America. Don't know if I've got much more to say. Tune in to Steve Donoghue's channel and see what he has to say about this particular story. I will catch you next week for next week's Comic Book Wednesday, which will be something different. It'll be different. Steve's not going to be happy. An overview of Marvel horror comic books from the 1970s next week? You know what? We better not tell Steve. Let's just keep this to ourselves. We won't tell Steve.